Hi there. Welcome once again to reading Aristotle's Politics. Um, I'm Clifford Bates. Yes, should say my name. Okay. Um, well, what are we doing today? We're doing chapter 13, which is continuing this, looking at politeia, this idea of chapter, this question of what regime is best for most cities. And it's not a one size, most interpretations are, well, it's polity. No, politeia is the regime called polity, as it's translated, is merely an interpretation of how to translate politeia. And they decide that he's talking about the politeia called politeia, right? Because he did this in that original typology. But we fail to remember that the original typology collapses. And although he mentions it always, any account that he's talked about politeia called politeia, it also gets collapsed with aristocracy, and it talks about the regime simply. It collapses in the term itself. The animal called animal, right? It suggests that the animal called animal is the most animal-like. And he says this regime is the most regime-like. So therefore, it's talking about regime itself. It's self-reflecting on the nature of politeia itself. Here we're talking about the question of how do we make what is best for a regime, establishing what is best for what people, what city, and what people. What is best for them, and it's not one size fit all. And he says the relationship between last chapter we talked about the two characteristics of quality and quantity, and then how you need to match it and blend it and reserve it, and that there's going to be certain things that are ruinous towards them. Okay. Now let's continue. And again, this is 50. This is why it's interesting. At the beginning of this, the device is used in regimes. And I think it's regimes, not 51, because he says, politeia frequently here in a generic sense, but reference back to this passage in 5.8, book 8, right? Lines 2 to 14 confirm that what is indicated at the end of 412, and that is the use of such devices as West balance regimes, polities, and aristocracies that approach polities, right? Again, I think this is he is interpreted this way, so he has to make everything fit this. It's I have a nail. I've said that this is a hammer, so this must be nails. Okay, I think this is he and many translators have made this intentional choice, but this is how they understand the text, and therefore they force translation to do it. I think this is wrong. I still think this is wrong. It's politeia should be treated as politeia. We should treat politeia, and therefore the double meaning of here. And we should stay with the regime, because politeia means regime. It means the constitution in the former sense. So therefore, the device is used in regimes as pretexts against the people are 5 in number. So he says, okay, therefore what? These are the techniques in any regime that is against the people. Not just only in the regime called regime, but in any regime. Being connected with the assembly, 5 in number, being connected with the assembly, the offices, the courts, the armaments, and exercises. So therefore, these are 5 in number. So therefore, the 5 in number in one sense. In regard to the assembly, regard to the offices, regards to the court, the armaments, and the question of exercising. As regards the assembly, the device that is open to all. The device is that it is open to all to attend assemblies, but either a fine is imposed on the well-off alone, or not for not attending, or a much larger one, on them. So therefore, in other words, a much larger one on the well-off. The well-off is only a fine or a much larger fine. So you're either going to, in other words, that there must be a fine imposed on the well-off alone for not attending, or a much larger one. If you're going to say if you don't show up, you're going to fine everyone, then you have to fine the wealthy more. So it becomes more. In other words, if everyone's being fined, the rich can afford it, the poor can't. So the poor will go, the rich won't. you have to make the fine against the wealthy more, so they will go anyways. Okay, so that either you fine them to make them go, or if everyone's being fined for not going, then you have to make the fine for them worse, so that they feel it more, that they will go. That's how you do that. To do this in that sense, this is a device against the many, to get the rich to go. One way that the many work is to get the rich to not care about politics, to care about their own wealth. Okay, a democratic regime lets the wealthy say, we don't want you in office, we don't want you to do this, so go make money, go do your things. Okay? So therefore, they find them like this. In regard to the offices, that it should not be open to those who are assessed to abjure. Now, 52, that is to decline office with oath supporting the claim that it would be unduly burdensome or financial for other reasons. So, in other words, I'm avoiding this because it's going to be too expensive. Don't let them do that. Make them sacrifice. It should not be open to those who are assessed to abjure. In other words, they were going to say, I can't do this. So therefore, if they can't do this, then they should only be only open to those who won't cause them hardship. Okay, but it should be to the poor. In other words, the wealthy shouldn't have to do it; that they would have to say, "I can't do it," but the poor should. So the assessment should be that the wealthy are going to be able to do it without it being a financial burden, and the poor should be a financial burden to them. As regard to the courts, there should be a fine against the well-off if they do not attend, but impunity for the poor, or else a large fine for the one and a small fine for the other, as the laws of Caritas. Again, this idea: make sure the wealthy go, make it in their interest. In some place, it is open to enroll all themselves for the assembly in the courts. But if they do not attend the assembly or adjudicate once they are enrolled, they are heavily fined, in order that they avoid enrolling, and though not being enrolled, do not adjudicate and do not attend the assembly. So that's another way. In other words, you either enroll or not, but once you didn't enroll, if you don't show up, you're punished. So you don't bother enrolling, right? That's the way. This is, again, it's the double ways of you can do this. The pretext against this way. They legislate in a similar manner concerning the possessions of heavy arms and exercising. It is open to those who are poor. It is open to those who are poor not to possess them, but the well-off are fined if they do not. While if they do not exercise, there is no fine for the former, as well but the well-off are fined, so that the ones take part in these things on account of the fine, and the other do not take part, though not being afraid of it. Okay, so therefore, the idea that this is the case of arming themselves and exercising. You force the people, not force the well-off to learn guns and learn arms, defend themselves. I mean, you should make the wealthy citizens go and learn to fight. Okay, that's how you protect them against the many. And they are also what? They are also educated. The question of exercising. Force them to, but don't require the many. Require the many to be lazy and poor. Make sugar. So give them free, cheap food that makes them fat. That's what you do to the many. You know, lots of sugar soda, candy bars, something like this. The poor will become fat and lazy. Don't you understand? That's how it works. Whereas the many have to be strong, have to be taught to be the rich and powerful, have to be exercise, do better. Now, these devices of legislation. Now, these devices of legislation or oligarchy. These are the oligarchy. What he's given up here so far, these are the devices against democracy. These are oligarchic devices. In democracies, however, there are counter devices to them. The poor, they give pay for attending the assembly and adjudicating, and arrange not to have the well-off fined or not for not attending. So don't in other words, pay the poor, but don't fine the rich. Democratic device. So it is evident that if one wishes to have a just mixture, elements from both must be brought together. For example, the ones being provided pay and the others fined. In this way, all would participate, while in the other way, the regime will come to belong to one side alone. Again, the idea here is to balance it, to prevent the regime from going to the extremes. If you let the poor dominate, and it goes to the root of the poor, it will be as bad as if you did let the rich make it to more rich, the oligarchy, extreme oligarchy. The extreme democracy and extreme oligarchies are equally negative outcomes. Okay, so therefore, what you need to do is moderate these things. You moderate it through balancing it. A regime, okay, a regime should be made up only of those possessing heavy arms. A regime should not, he says the regime called regimes, heavy arms. A regime should be made up of only of those possessing arms. But it's not. But it is not possible to define the amount of assessment in a simple fashion and say that so much must be available. In other words, you have to have enough money to pay for your arms. Therefore, you need to be able to do this. You have to have how much should you be able to do this? Rather, one should investigate what sort of amount is largest that would let those taking part in the regime be more numerous than those not taking part, and arrange it to be this. So, what is the most numerous? In other words, arrange it that to allow the most numerous to take part in the regime than those who are not taking part. Whatever the dominant part, whatever they make them more numerous. For the poor are willing to remain tranquil, even when they no longer, when they take no part in the prerogatives, provided no one acts arrogantly towards them or deprives them of any of their property. This is important. This is the famous line from Machiavelli. If you don't touch their women and things, they'll leave you alone. So don't act arrogantly towards them. Don't take their property. Don't take their goods and don't take their women. Right? That's Machiavelli again, the prince. This is the thing. Don't act arrogantly towards them. The many will be pretty much leave tranquil if you don't act arrogantly toward and you leave their property alone, whatever good things they have. Don't take away what they have. Provided no one acts arrogantly towards them or deprives them of any of their property. Yet this is not easy, for it does not always turn out that those taking part in the governing body, the Plutuma, are the refined sort. In other words, they're not the best sort, refined. These kind of people. When war comes, they are in the habit of shirking if they are poor, unless they receive sustenance. If someone provides them sustenance, however, they are willing to go to war. See, that's the problem, right? When war comes, they're not going to go. If I can't, if I'm in the plotuma, the ruling part, right? In other words, if the refined people aren't in charge, what's going to happen? If we're going to war, you better make sure we can feed each, take care of us, pay for it. We're not going to pay for it. We're not going to go to war. Okay. If someone provides them sustenance, however, they were willing to go to war. In some cases, the regime is made up. Okay, this is a polity. I disagree with this. This is again not in the Greek. In some cases, the regime is made up not only of those bearing heavy arms, but of those who had once done so. So therefore, the regime is, in the sense, the ones who not only possessed heavy arms, those who served, but who formerly did. Among the Malians, the regime was made up of these, though they elected to office those who were actually soldiers. So therefore, there was a, this is, in fact, isn't this this is high this is Robert Heinlein's famous book, Starship Troopers, Starship Troopers, where to be a citizen you needed to serve first, right? But here they picked the actual soldiers, not the former, in this city. That they elect the office from those who are actually soldiers. And the first sort of regime that arose among the Greeks after kingship was made of the warrior elements and initially of cavalrymen. So that's the first regime. The first regime that among after kingship was this made of warrior elements and essentially and initially of cavalrymen. For strength and preeminence in war then belong to the cavalrymen. Without organization, the heavily armed element is useless. So in other words, cavalry. If you have few of them, cavalry is better. If you can't be, in other words, heavily armed soldiers need to be organized in large mass. Need organization and large mass, and heavily armed. The heavily armed element usually, but experience in such matters and tactical arrangement were lacking among the ancients, so that their strength laid in cavalrymen. So therefore, this is an argument of technology. Notice this: that skill, techne changes this. Skill and knowledge. That the initial thing was there few, because there were few. Few had they had the money and the means. Therefore, they relied on cavalry, not infantry. Again, isn't that the Middle Ages? Middle Ages too. The knights, but knights are easily destroyed. Agincourt proved that. Who won Agincourt? It was the English. The English won with their longbow. The longbow was a middle class weapon. You needed not a peasant weapon; it's a middle class weapon. It is someone with some training. You need some skill, but it's easy to do. Anyone can own it. It's not. It's relatively cheap. It's more devastating. The longbow can. The longbow could kill a heavily armed soldier. It was the gun of the time. Only with the firearm does that change. Okay, gunpowder, the cannon first. The cannon altered the war. It was the rise of armor men, the armor soldiers, then the longbow, then cannon, then personal rifle, and the rifled. Then what happened? Voila, a bomb. All right. This is Carol Mosley's book on the one he did right before he died. He died like in 78, 79. So, and then he wrote a posthumous book. It was working on about. I should remember the title. I always hold on. Yeah, it's calculating weapon systems and political stability, where he argued that, again, found in Aristotle, it's regimes, the popular regimes are stable when the people themselves have the heavy arms, okay? That they control the military grade arms. Those are the most stable regimes, when the people, the many, have the military grade arms. As technology denied that, then the regimes, the democratic regimes become less and less stable. So therefore, this is an interesting argument here from that point of view. That Aristotle saying is, for strength and preeminence, the war belonged to the cavalrymen. Without organization, the heavily armed element is useless. But experience in such matters and tactical games were lacking among the ancients, so that their strength led to cavalrymen. But in the cities increased in size, and those with heavily arms provided relatively more strength, more persons took part in the regime. Hence, the regimes that which we now call power regimes, that we can now call regimes, polities, right, used to be called democracies. Okay, see the point? That the ancient regimes were oligarchic and kingly is reasonable. On account of their lack of manpower, cities did not have much of a middling element. Being relatively being relatively both few in number and weak in organizations, the people put up with being ruled. You didn't mind when the ruler was the only person. There were not enough of you. You didn't have the skill to do it. They were the warriors. They provided you for defense. Therefore, you put up with them being, since they were going to fight and die, and they were doing it. Therefore, you put up with it. They were protecting you. They were benefiting you. So you put up with it. That's when there were few people, and that the, the people themselves couldn't really afford the weapons. But now, when there's more, and there's a middling sort of people like this, then there's more people who are willing to defend. The more infantrymen, the hoplite units were able to defeat you. Infantry always defeats, organized infantry always defeats cavalry. Remember that little scene in Braveheart when he says, taught them the ancient Romans with the pikes, and then all of a sudden all those noble English cavalry get slaughtered, right? This is the nature of warfare. Infantry always beats cavalry. Cavalry doesn't win. Cavalry can only defeat infantry when it's weak or when it's broken and running away and running back. The cavalry usually slaughters infantry when the infantry has broken lines and running away, trying to preserve themselves. The cavalry comes in and slaughters from the back. It does. Now you can use cavalry to make assaults on things, but it's costly, and you usually slaughter the horses. Okay, so therefore, and this is the point. I always remember this point from this, that hence the historical argument, the origin argument, is that the ancient regimes, in other words, this is what they used to call democracies. What we call public regimes now were called democracies in the ancients. And the ancient regime where oligarchic and kingly is reasonable on account of this is what again, this is why they put up with it. For what reason there are several sorts. Okay, for what reason there are several sorts of regimes? Then why are there several sorts of regimes? Then the argument goes. Why there are other sorts beyond these generally? Why there are other sorts of regimes beyond those generally spoken of? For democracy is not one of number, and similarly with the other. Okay, in other words, the idea is that democracy is not merely one of number; it's not many and few, but rather the poor, right? And oligarchy is not few but rich. Okay, that's why. Further, in other words, that one reason is one reason why there's more regimes than just merely two, is because few and many is not simply few and many; it's rich and poor. Okay. Further, what the varieties are, and for what reason it happens that they are different. In other words, there's going to be the varieties, the different varieties, based on the questions. For what the varieties are, and for what reason it happens that they are different. So every regime will have the different regimes will based upon the different reasons for them for being. Therefore, there's going to be not only question of number, but again the quantity-quality relationship. And this remember that calculation, that the question of quantity, there's at least four subvariables of. Remember, he even said there's 5 categories. If I remember correctly. Remember, he talked about the 5 categories and 4. That there was. Where did he say 5? I remember he said 5 someplace. Hold on. Oh yeah, the 5 devices and 5 categories of devices of here. So there's a question of devices, the 5 devices. In other words, there was 4 quantities of the four qualities, right? The four qualities, those things, and that there's a quantity and quality, size and number, which was the largest, which is not, which was, and then multiply the relationship to the other. And then what we do is then we note the devices on the four different mechanisms, those five specific ways that you'd add devices to restrain the one or to restrain the other, right? He says the five for democracies, but he also applies the oligarchy. Each one of those could apply either one way or the other, okay? And it moves the regime to moderates it, moderates the divisive here. So so therefore, let's go back for a second. Let's go back for here. So what? For what reasons there are several sorts of regimes? Then, semicolon. It's a question, right? For what reason are there several? Why are there? That's one question. Why are there several sorts of regimes? Why are other? Why there are others sort beyond those generally spoken of? And he goes now for democracy is not one in number, and similarly with the others, so they're not one in number, right? That's right. I think that's what it means there. There's more than one democracy, more than one oligarchy. Further, and there's what and so that's one, two, and for what further what the varieties are, and for what reason it happened that they are different. In addition, which is best which is the best regime for the majority of cases, and of the other regimes which sort suits for which city. This is so. Therefore, he ends this last paragraph. It's an account of what we've spoke of. So we have spoken up of these questions. What are okay? What are the several sorts of regimes? Why are the different varieties of them, of each type, and were they? What are the varieties and what are the types, right? And for what reason they happen to be this. So that's so the democracy, oligarchy, those mentioned. Then we have the discussion of the four the varieties of that. Then we have what a discussion. He says, uh, 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 which we did, right? That's in addition, which is best regime for the majority of cases. And that is the question. Is it's no answer to that question. The majority, it is people. It is the regime, but the regime means regime. That's all, and it's all different types. It's going to be. It's going to. It's not a specific type of things. It's simply going to be the one that fits them. There's no one size fit all cookie cutter solution to this. And the other regimes which suit which sort of cities. Again, what suit. He basically hits out that what suits them depends on the people. It's relative to the specifics of the particular place, the particular city, and the particular people that make up the city, and how they're divided. He's just discussed this, and this is where we left off. Okay, now we are left in the next chapter, chapter 14, which we will talk 14, 15, and 16, I think, is the separation of powers. This is where we get the infamous discussion of the offices. And everyone said, this is when he's talking about the institution of regimes. This is what he means to be an institution of regimes. We didn't discuss it. No. The institution of regimes this is his discussion. This is almost a kind of a discussion of the parts of the city again. He needs to speak about the parts of the city again. The institutions. This is the institutional chapter, 14, 15, and 16. And then we go to next 5, change. Metabale. Okay, we're going to end here. I'm sorry if I went off too much. If you have any questions, please put them below, and when I see them, I'll answer them. If you like what we've done and like this, again, share with a friend, share on social media, post it, get more attention to this. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. Encourage others to subscribe. We have to grow because we grow. I get, I hit that big 1,000 number. We get more privileges and maybe get some revenue. Um, okay, yes, I'm not. It's not okay. Um, if you're not like, you can say no, but say why so I can know why. You can follow me on social media below. If you want to help, again, this is again costing. That's why the revenue getting more people to watch would be useful because we can get revenue. But because YouTube is charging us for our size now, we're big enough. I'm big enough in number of videos that they're saying to me, "Oh yeah," and I'm paying monthly to keep this going. I would like to make this if it becomes profitable, then maybe they'll keep it themselves. Um, but okay, we'll see. Um, I hope people get something from this. Oh, this is just one giant vanity project by you Bates. So okay, that's sad. Um, Another way you can help, you're not going to do subscribe star procreate Patreon. There's mechanisms to subscribe there to help. Okay, but then you got to say, but Bates, you're not doing anything for us. What are the motivations for us to join it? Well, this motivation is it helps. If you build something there, I will join. I'll come there and do things. But I'm not going to build something for vanity purposes. That there. Okay, you want to help, you can send money. Okay, you don't want to join those things. It just Another way you can do it is buy my book. You can buy my other books, okay, but I won't get the money for it directly. This, you buy this, I'll get the money for something. You buy Amazon directly like that, okay, I'll get it less. I mean, if you buy through the publisher, Zulu, yes, I'll get I'll get the profit that the bookstores get. If you buy it by the bookstore, I'll get only the profit that I get paid for per book. That's why getting Lulu, I get 5 times much. So it's it is a better deal. Yes, I understand Lulu will charge you, but what is this? This is not a commentary, not interpretation. This is a tech. This is kind of a workbook study book. It's kind of like Cliff's Notes on the politics. It helps you go through the text chapter by chapter. Whew, that's it. That's enough for this. We'll see you next time. I'm going to look at chapter 14. Okay, that's it. I hope you have a good day. Take care. Bye bye. And good day.